Welcome to this panel session currently going on today. This is the Local Economy of the Future session. Hope you all had a fantastic lunch. I'm Johnny Hazeldine. I'm one of the policy managers here at BCC, where I lead our economy and business environment work. I've got a fantastic panel here with me today, working our way along the panel. Robert Begbie. Robert was appointed CEO of NatWest Commercial and Institutional in March 2024. He's also CEO of NatWest Markets, which is led since 2019. Welcome, Robert. Caroline Platts. Caroline is Managing Director of Platts Agriculture Limited. Platts is a third-generation family business established over 50 years ago. Caroline has successfully overseen the company's operations in the UK and exports to Ireland for the past 17 years. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
Next, we've got Charlie Field. Charlie is Deputy Chairman of CPJ Field & Co Limited, and also here representing Family Business UK, where he sits on the board. Welcome, Charlie. And then last but by no means least, we have Katie Holmes, who's CEO of the British Chamber of Commerce in Dubai, and recently led its transition from the long-established British business group, Dubai and Northern Emirates. So welcome to everyone on the panel this afternoon. Bit of housekeeping. So we're going to go through a few questions to the panel. Once that's done, we're then going to invite you to take part in some interactive contributions. So you will hopefully be answering the same questions that the panel are answering. We'll be using Slido today, so the details will be going up on the screens when we get to that section, and then we'll go through some of those afterwards. So, brilliant. Let's get started. So, the local economy is a significant part of how we all operate. It's the core function of the Chamber of Commerce network. All chambers are local, but they also have a national and international reach. So it's a really vital topic happening in towns and cities across the UK. We're going to start by kind of discussing some of the opportunities, but also challenges that these businesses are facing. So I'm wondering, Caroline, can we come to you first? So it varies across the UK. So we said you're based in Wales.
Yes.
So you obviously have the national picture, the regional picture, but also the devolved picture.
Correct.
So a mixture of different things. So I'm keen to understand a bit about what challenges you're facing and what support you perhaps need that you're not necessarily already getting, and what could potentially be done better.
Sure, okay. So we're fortunate that we're a 50-year-old family business and have a really good relationship manager. We bank with NatWest, so you know. But my understanding from national level and regional level with businesses that I speak to, especially startups, is the access to finance, but opening up the accounts, looking at lending, the time it takes for applications to go through. But that knowledge base in understanding your working capital, there is really a lack of local, where do you go to access finance? We talk about the shared prosperity funds. So Wrexham are currently working on formulating a conference whereby we can get all those like-minded institutions together, like the Chamber, so that we can signpost. But typically, where do we go to find a relationship manager like I have when you're a startup?
Okay, so that's very nicely segued onto Robert. So, the challenges. What solutions can NatWest provide?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with what Caroline talked about. Is you can't beat having people on the ground who have knowledge of the local area, the local community, and the local customer base, and that's a start point. There is no one answer to this question, I think, because there was a recent study around finance in the regions, and it was very analytical. And what it basically said is that it's logical that finance follows where growth is and where opportunity is. And that sounds intuitively right. But there were the thing around there's not enough finance going into certain regions. Part of the answer here is to stimulate growth. Now, the banks have a role to play in that as well. Caroline talked about startups. We are the biggest bank for startups in the UK. We have our accelerator hubs. There's 13 of them spread out across the UK, all designed to help entrepreneurs and new businesses to not only access finance, but access the expertise and the learning and the experience that we can either provide them or we can bring in as outside partners to help with that. Now, a lot more. We need to do a lot more in that field. But certainly, we've had some unbelievable successes of companies we've taken in as entrepreneurs and seen them grow into multi-million customers. So alongside that, making finance simple as well. And I talked this morning about making it easy at the point of access so that especially small customers are able to access lending digitally. You know, they don't need to fill in multiple application forms, wait for weeks, and so on. So there's a lot of things in there. Digital support for relationship managers is the way we think the best way to actually deliver for customers in the region. But it starts with being on the ground. I don't think you can ever truly understand customers or communities or regions without actually having people on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And are you seeing that kind of across the regions there's different approaches to this, or is it very much the same problems exist everywhere, so therefore it's the same approach?
I think there's a similar set of problems, and you know, the Chamber of Commerce organise lots of local events, and I've attended both them and you know, other aspects. And you know, one common theme is access to skills and workforce. You know, that is common wherever you go. It's a much bigger topic than it would have been even 5 years ago. You know, and in some cases we get groups of customers together and it dominates the conversation. It's almost the number one thing they want to talk to each other around in the region. So you know, clearly that's something that we can help with, but there needs to be a broader push around how do we develop the workforce of the future and the necessary skills for the companies out in the regions and where they need them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the number one thing all of our surveys always say. It's the access to skills that I'm sure all of you and all of your businesses across the chambers are struggling with the most at the moment. We'll come to Katie. In terms of this skills challenge and the skills gap, how important are local partnerships in kind of developing plans to deal with this? Obviously, we've got LSIPs across the chambers, but both kind of, from your point of view, internationally, but also experience possibly domestically as well.
Yeah, so for context, Dubai is made up of 80% expats. So the Chamber, whilst we all have the same proposition, community and relationships are probably, well, absolutely core of our proposition. So we're based on the British Embassy compound, so we work really closely with the Department for Business and Trade, and education's a very topical subject, and it runs across all of our other verticals as well. We engage with schools and universities as well, which is echoing a lot of what the other panelists have been talking about, that disconnect, you know, bridging the gap between industry and education. But we're also, from a relation perspective, we work very closely with Dubai Chamber, and they have 100 business groups with all different sectors as well. So we focus and align with them, but also our peers across the international chambers. So we regularly host events with peers in the German Business Council, Canadian, Australian, Finnish, Polish. It's endless. We had a big inter-council networking event for 500 people representing 25 business councils. So we're always looking at that collaborative approach.
It's interesting, and I think that's probably true across the international kind of collaboration piece, where there will be differences amongst different countries, but at the same time, a lot of the challenges are exactly the same. It doesn't matter where you go in the world.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point there. Charlie, from a kind of a family business point of view, similar issues presumably, but any potential different approaches?
Well, I think from a family business perspective, where so many businesses tend to be rooted in communities, that might not just be one community, but really a fundamental part. It's a similar approach, but working with a far more local degree of integration. And often those partnerships that we see flourish and work really well are those that are led from the bottom up. So often within particular businesses where there are local or regional managers who have particular links to a school or an institution. But I think there's also a space for creativity as well. And whilst we might always look initially at education and at further education, there are other elements and other partners out there that can provide skills. A shameless plug this week is Armed Forces Week, and out in the corridor there's the Armed Forces Covenant, and I think there's areas that we can look from the veteran community, the Reserve Forces community as well, who can assist employers finding an interesting array of skills that might not necessarily come directly from education.
Absolutely, and I think that's very important to kind of look at the different channels that are throughout there. So, put you all slightly on the spot here. I apologise in advance, but we've got a bit of extra time, so might as well. You all run or work in businesses of varying sizes to varying degrees, and perhaps if I start at this end with Robert, what do you find the biggest challenges when you have new recruits, possibly from a kind of university and school leaver age end of the spectrum, into your businesses, whether they're multinational like NatWest or smaller family businesses?
I think one of them is, post-pandemic, we've all found a new way of working, and that's entirely appropriate and suits, people's lifestyles as well as the demands of what business needs. But when you're coming new into a business or you're coming new into a department, part of it has to be the social and the learning interaction that comes with spending time together as teams and with people. I don't see how you can ever learn the whole job by spending most of your time remotely. So what we find is that actually that when we canvass our colleagues in relation to the working arrangements, the ones that are least enamored by being able to work remotely for 1 or 2 or 3 days a week are our junior population that are coming in, because they want to have that. They want to be with the people who they can learn from, and they want to be with each other socially and so on. So, that's certainly a more recent phenomenon post-pandemic that wasn't there before, but it is an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Caroline?
Same question. So we have a big onboarding month, I would say, but it's creating that belonging, so introducing them to our culture, because at the end of the day, the people make your business, so it's all about their understanding of our core values and behaviours. They have a full integrated training programme, and we've recently developed Wrexham Leadership Alliance, so I collaborate with other businesses in our area, and we have external training, so we're not relying on local colleges and universities. We're creating our own skills hub on Wrexham Industrial Estate, so it's all about the culture for us, again, family business and succession planning, and so every employee knows when they start where they're aiming to be, and where they are on our growth plans. The first month that they start, they can see what our journey is in the next 3 to 5 years and where they will be in our organisation. And that has the buy-in. We've got members of staff that have been with us for 20 plus years, and I've still got a member of staff that's been with us since we started 50 years ago. So it's all about the culture.
Brilliant. Charlie?
I think there's a theme which I'm probably going to expand upon here, but I would say the greatest challenge is also the greatest opportunity, and that's time. As business owners and business managers, time is our most precious resource, and be it seeking out funds, seeking out government programs or so on, we might not necessarily have the time to find the right thing for us. However, one thing we do have and can give is time to develop people that join our businesses. And in the same way that Robert was saying, that taking that time to embed people and understand and bring them into the culture of the organisation, if we can all carve out an extra 10 minutes in our day to assist new joiners and assist with their development plans, then we'll be setting them up for success in their careers.
Yeah, definitely. And Katie?
Yeah, just themes there, kind of allyship and mentorship, really, really critical. We've recently been launched a campaign in Dubai to connect so 60% of our members are owner-managed businesses, and there's this kind of lonely at the top, which I'm sure it's experienced elsewhere as well. But also, given the nature of Dubai being an expat community, you have a lot of largely female population that are looking to go back to work, but because they don't have the families and network around them, they can't do anything but the part-time and hybrid working. So we've been connecting and educating businesses to reach into the communities to find these really highly talented, time-limited females, and we've had some fantastic responses. We did a speed networking, which helped women that maybe not had the confidence previously, and we've had a great success rate. But I love the new generation coming through. I think it's really, to be disruptive, I love hybrid working. I think it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. kind of back onto the theme here, which is local economy of the future. It's a very broad topic, as we've kind of alluded to about the various things we've discussed so far. So as a kind of final questioner in this part, if I start with Katie at the end there again, what do you think the barriers are that still exist at local level, but also what opportunities are there? We talked about some great young people coming through and the opportunities. What opportunities are there for local economies in the future?
So as a communication specialist, I will say communication. Even yesterday's event where all the CEOs and chamber boards are talking about better communication, we all want to hear success stories. So I think it's a barrier currently because we don't know what we don't know. But I think better communication, and that's obviously in terms of employee engagement as well, so people are feeling heard. If I could just share from again, very Dubai-centric, but the concept of the Majlis. So it's a sort of Bedouin historics in terms of people would gather in the desert and the elder would invite people of experts to come and sit with him and he would listen and understand what the problems were and they would come to a collective resolution. And now that Majlis can be, in a beautiful ruler's palace with chandeliers and gold everywhere, but still the concept is there. So I think communication and consultation is really, really key, and that's across all generations within the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. The communication, whether it's within a business, between businesses, it's all very much important. If you don't have the communication, you don't have a viable business or a local economy. Charlie?
For me, I think it's about opening up access to opportunity and enabling young people to see the opportunities that exist, not just on their doorstep, but also just a few miles down the road. I think there's a great opportunity for businesses to collaborate through the chambers, through local initiatives, but also through the third sector as well. And there's some excellent initiatives being run by organisations like BITC and similar. So being able to open up that access to opportunity, I think, is absolutely critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Caroline?
There's a couple of ones in our region, energy, the national grid and net zero. So if we are creating a green energy, the restriction to be able to connect to the national grid. So typically on Wrexham Industrial Estate, we're on the year 2035. So even if we were to put green energy plants in, we can't get a connection to that grid, which restricts our growth. And then on the net zero agenda is choosing the framework that's applicable to your business. So we work within the wood manufacturing sector, collecting wood residues, and then we're supplying the dairy and agricultural industry. So we look at B Corp as a framework for net zero. But for me as a business, is that the right framework? So identifying a framework that's fit for purpose in your organisation, I think, is a challenge. But also using net zero as your competitive advantage. So as I said earlier, it's all about the people, obviously your profits, but looking after the planet at the same time. And I think that's got to be at the top of our agenda. But how does the government and how do we have that in alignment and how do we choose the correct framework? I think that's the greatest barrier for many businesses, new startups, established businesses. And it would be nice to have some focus on that really for all industries. So we're not all trying to fit one framework. If there was a framework fit for all, so to speak.
So kind of more personalised and kind of there's almost too much information out there and you need the stuff that is relevant or want the stuff that is relevant for you.
And AI is throwing in there. That's such a challenge as well. But I think data is the driver, the key force, and knowing your business in terms and key skills. And I mean, there's so many barriers. We don't have enough time to go through them all, but that gives you a little flavour of where we're at.
Absolutely. And then Robert?
Yeah, and building on all of those points, I mentioned this morning about the Future Fit analysis that we launched this week, and we've talked about skills, but the other three around sustainability, technology and innovation, and supply chain. And when I go around the country, I see some great examples of where companies are getting together to co-solve those problems. And actually everybody thinks about supply chains as being China or somewhere out there, and actually sometimes the solutions are down the road. And so for us helping with the Chamber and others to build those connections with universities and with companies and like-minded people, I think that the solutions are sometimes within the remit of the area, but it's making that connectivity. And I think having then clearly supported by the things around planning and local government and so on. But I think that there are solutions out there. Sometimes I guess it's hard for companies to see them when they're caught up with their day-to-day piece. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just coming back to kind of the funding pieces, and this is probably more from a kind of small business point of view, but I'm sure you've all got views on it. How much of a role should government play in providing support to businesses and local communities, but specifically business support, and what should that business support function look like? Does anyone have any view on that? I'm happy to go along the panel, or anyone just put wave.
Well, from a family business perspective, it would be remiss of me not to say that there's a role that government can play in supporting business, particularly family business, which we would argue is an engine room of the economy, in transitioning to future generations. And there's a lot of discussion at the moment about the future of inheritance tax, in particular business property relief, and so on. And that's an area that we would advocate very strongly to retain in order to perpetuate long-term sustainable business as a force for good in the economy. And I think that whilst there are obvious pressures that will need to be answered, we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater and risk a sustainable part of our economy in terms of funding the short-term need.
Fair enough. Has anyone else got a view on that before we move on?
Well, I think export finance is really critical. So certainly in the UAE, there are a lot of strategic projects where export finance is supporting British business regionally. And then the terms and conditions are that you're utilising British business in that supply chain. So yeah, that's a good kind of best kept secret.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the aspect of making sure that the availability of funding, and funding comes in many sources, from equity through to debt and so on, that there's a framework around how that gets delivered. And I think government has a role to play within that, especially in some of the newer technologies and the sustainability agenda, where it's not, a lot of these things there isn't a lot of history with it. So actually we've all got to understand better what those long-term projects and funding requirements are. Good example, we've just done our first intellectual property loan, right? I mean, that in itself is different for a normal bank funding model, where we look at assets or we look at cash flows or whatever. So we all need to evolve, to make sure the economy grows. Yeah.
I guess it's tax reliefs on the net zero topic, and also looking at the late payment culture that we have across the nation, and the need to support those new startups to assist in their working capital, so there isn't a need to borrow money. The larger organisations need to be paying their bills a lot sooner, and the government could look at that as part of their policy. And that would help those new startups that are starved in their working capital.
Yeah, 100%. We hear that an awful lot from especially smaller businesses. Great. Okay, so now we're coming on to the interactive part of the session. You will look absolutely thrilled about that. So we're hopefully coming onto the screen should be some details about Slido. Here we go. If you could either scan the QR code or go to slido.com and enter the access code. Basically the same questions that were put to the panel. So hopefully, I think they're coming on the screen shortly. But if not, just to run through them again, how can we ensure funding and support is available to businesses across every region of the UK? How important are local partnerships in helping to develop the skills businesses need? And what barriers continue to affect businesses at local level, and what are the opportunities for business growth? So we're going to have 5-10 minutes now of you hopefully discussing between you all. Don't all have to sit there glued to your phones. One of you can log into the phone and you can all discuss it. And then we will come back in a minute, read out some of the answers. They're already coming onto the screen. Great. And we can get the panel to respond to them, hopefully. So leave you with you for the next 5 minutes. so we're doing one question at a time. Right, so thank you very much for answering the first question. Has everyone finished discussing? Brilliant. So this is the first question. You've obviously fantastically answered it. We'll discuss it for a bit, then go on to the next one, etc. So I'm going to go down the line, and each of the panelists is going to perhaps talk about something that they've spotted on there that they think they've got the most relevant space to contribute to. So, Robert, if I start with you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit in there about, you know, the regional lending dynamics, and I touched on it a little bit in terms of that analysis. I mean, we don't set caps by the amount of lending we're going to make to one region or the other. You know, we will have risk appetites for sectors, whether that's housing or construction or manufacturing or whatever. So really, you know, I know there is a common perception that there's more money flows to some regions than others. It kind of plays back to what I talked about earlier, which is us playing our part in helping stimulate economic growth within those regions that will then stimulate more demand for lending into the economy, but also finding those unlocks where banks can partner, you know, where there are either risks and or capital requirements that wouldn't be naturally provided from the bank itself. So there is definitely work to do on that, but just to reassure everybody, we don't say there's only a certain amount of lending we would do to one region versus another.
Brilliant. Caroline, did anything jump out particularly for you there?
In terms of funding, working within your local regional community, so ensure that you buy off local suppliers and monitoring your supply chain so that you help the funds stay with locally. I think it's important. But in terms of access to funds, is using your network, your local chamber and other organisations to understand where there is access to funds that are available in terms of grant funding, local funding. There's loads of resources out there, but it's creating those hubs in regions and communicating it.
Absolutely, and that's where businesses talking to each other,
Absolutely.
joining business groups such as Chambers of Commerce are fantastic
and
to do that.
And using your valued network.
Exactly.
And one experience, if there's a problem, there's always a solution, and people like to hear stories and then benefit from those stories. But working with like-minded people is key.
Absolutely. Charlie?
I think absolutely. Building on that point, inevitably, the distribution of funding to regional levels, usually from central government, includes the creation of bureaucracy and form filling. The ability to be able to build knowledge through local hubs, to be able to share best practice of what's worked well, to reduce the friction in accessing those funds, I think is absolutely critical.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Kitty?
Yeah, and sort of looking for alternative sources. So the British Chamber in Dubai, through the pandemic, we had 60% of our membership were not supported by any government funding whatsoever. So they were, then looking to make themselves as attractive and, optimizing themselves for financial investment from either within or FDI coming in. So yeah, it's kind of looking at alternative sources, have a bit more control on your destiny.
Absolutely, and it sounds really useful. The one I just wanted to pick up on there, because I don't think we've really mentioned it yet in this session, is planning, which I know a lot of people have issues with. And I noticed mention about local planning and funding for graduates. For those of you that aren't aware, BCC have launched a programme to fund graduate planners and other routes. So if you want to hear more information about that afterwards and you weren't aware, please come to the BCC desk outside and we can discuss it further. Brilliant. Okay, so I think we're going to go on to the second question now. So same routine as last time. So how important are local partnerships in helping to develop the skills businesses need? Off you go. Brilliant. Okay, so we didn't think we'd give you as much time on that one because we think there's pretty much consensus on the answer to it. But once again, I'm going to go down the panel to kind of get their views on this. So, Robert?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about partnerships and leveraging, you know, what's out there. I mean, that's clearly what's coming through, and that's clearly where I do see it travelling around the regions is where it works successfully.
Brilliant. Caroline?
Do what we've done and set up a leadership alliance and use one another's premises, use one another's skills. Don't rely on the colleges and schools. Do it yourself as businesses. You get there a lot quicker.
100%. And, you know, Chambers, please keep banging the drum. Incredibly, there are businesses out there that aren't members yet and so may not be aware of the excellent work you're doing. So please just keep championing it and mentioning it to all the businesses in your area.
Izzy?
Yeah, partnership's really key, but I think as long as there's an overarching vision that everybody's playing into, so that the partnerships have some consistency on approach.
Brilliant. And kind of from a chamber point of view, LSIPs are very important, so please continue to support them. Excellent. Okay, so we're now on to the third and final question, hopefully. So what barriers continue to affect businesses at a local level, and what are the opportunities for business growth? Off you go. Great, thank you very much for all of your answers once again. Slightly more varied as expected this time, but still some very clear themes coming through. So start with Katie this time.
Yeah, so I think sharing best practice, there's lots of themes there with, saving time and learning from lessons. We actually launched a podcast called Don't Do That, Do This, and it's simply lessons learned. 30% of our new members are UK inbound, and a lot of them are, they're on their own and they're trying to find their way. So as an established business community, we have the podcasts and then mentoring sessions that save people time and share their expertise, and then all the collaborations that come from that as well. So that would save quite a few of those challenges as well, I think, just shortcuts to best practice.
Brilliant. Charlie?
I think for me it stuck out the pick-up on local government and national government. My plea to everyone in the room is please don't hide your light under a bushel, be it at local, regional or national level. Please get out there shouting what you're doing in your businesses, the employment that you're creating, the opportunities you're creating, and enable those policymakers at all levels to understand the importance of getting behind business, both locally but also nationally. We hear an awful lot from large public companies. Private companies tend to be the engine room and growth drivers of local economies. So please don't keep it quiet. Get out there and champion it. And please, BCC, keep going, and the Chamber's doing that for us all as well.
We'll certainly try our best. Caroline?
I'll pick up the one on public transport. So we've identified on our industrial estate and also Wrexham industrial estate that we can't get youngsters who haven't got a driving licence to work, and there is no public transport, so they can't apply for the job because they can't get to work. So as part of Wrexham Leadership Alliance, we've collaborated, we've done a research study and submitted that data to the Welsh Minister for Transport, and so we've really enforced in our region to take action, and we're making progress. So if you believe wholeheartedly in something, collaborate, get together with like-minded businesses in your region, create a hub and take action.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Sorry, I get a bit passionate about it.
It's been passionate. Robert?
Yeah, there was a couple up there, and it builds on Katie's point. A lot of what we've talked about is local, regional, but also there's the whole area of international and broadening out the distribution, especially in the SME space. And I think we've all got a part to play in making that a more straightforward process and making it more intuitive. Funding's part of it, but there's a whole host of other things that need to come together as a package, I think, to make it easier for SMEs to go internationally.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we're coming quickly to the end here now. It's been a fantastic session. Thanks for your participation in the audience, but especially big thanks to brilliant panellists on the stage, so Robert, Caroline, Charlie and Katie, and again thanks to NatWest for sponsoring. I think what we've learned from this today, and hopefully people will agree, is how vital the local economy is in everything we do, both across the Chamber network, but across the UK and internationally as well. So there's been some really good contributions here. So all it is we say is thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Thank you.